Hello, here are the morning news. Latin America marks 2 years since the death of Hugo Chavez, the Venezuelan revolutionary who initiated a wave of progressive changes during his leadership. Several events are scheduled to commemorate the legacy of President Chavez, whose Bolivarian movement paved the way for massive redistribution of wealth and democratic reform in Venezuela. Millions flooded to Caracas upon hearing of Chavez's passing, and dozens of foreign dignitaries have flew to attend the leader's funeral 2 years ago now. Chavez was also a founder of institutions that cemented unprecedented unity among Latin American nations. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro spoke about Chavez's legacy.
2 años de la partida del comandante Chávez.
2 years since Commander Chavez left us. And 2 years we can say, Chavez, your fight, your sacrifice, your effort was worth it. Your fight has not been lost, nor will it be lost. Here there is a people on its feet, united, working. Here is your armed forces. Here is your country. We still have our homeland, Comandante Hugo Chavez.
In Havana, talks resumed between Cuban and the European Union officials on trade and normalization of relations since the bloc lifted diplomatic sanctions in 2008. This is the third round of talks since last April. It is focused on increasing trade, investment, and political dialogue. The discussions, which will resume Thursday, come as Cuba continues its negotiations to normalize relations with the U.S. And as millions of Colombians look to the peace talks underway in Havana, the country is undergoing economic difficulties. Both civil society and economic experts say the development plan numbers of the government don't add up. Our correspondent Natalia Margarita has more in this story.
The Colombian National Development Plan, which is supposed to set the policy framework for the next 4 years, has turned out to be underfinanced. According to economist Mario Valencia, the budget presented by the government was entirely miscalculated.
A budget of 790 billion Colombian pesos that they calculated was based on economic assumptions that are far away from reality. For instance, oil prices calculated at $84 per barrel, coal at $75 per ton, when the ton is actually at $65. They also assume an economic growth of above the 4%, when everyone have estimated that the economy is not going to grow more than 3.5%.
For opposition Senator Jorge Robledo, the government also assumed rapid growth in the agricultural sector and industry, without taking into account the drop in oil prices that indeed affects the national economy. Robledo said the Ministry of Finance has been warned about the miscalculation since December last year.
But they insist in keeping the budget like that. And just a day before officially submitting the National Development Plan, they had to cut it by 90 billion Colombian pesos, which is huge budget reduction. However, the development plan still has a cost that does not correspond to reality.
Among the budget cuts, 70 billion Colombian pesos were cut from education, health system, and job programs, issues that are crucial to eradicate inequality, especially when the country is expected to move into a post-conflict period.
Calculations on the cost of the post-conflict have been already made. Some claim that 10 years of post-conflict could cost around 200 billion Colombian pesos. It is clear that the current National Development Plan will not contribute to a post-conflict period.
As Colombia's peace talks advance in Havana, Cuba, the National Development Plan appears to be far away from aiding the construction of peace in Colombia, and especially far away from eradicating the inequalities that have been at the core of the more than 50 years of armed conflict. From Bogotá, Natalia Margarita, Telesur.
More in Latin America, Brazilian lawmakers approved a bill recognizing feminicide, increasing penalties in cases of women killed due to domestic or gender-based violence. The new bill defines feminicide as an aggravated form of homicide and carries a 12 to 30 years a jail term. According to official figures, nearly 50,000 women lost their lives in Brazil through violence over the past decade. Four people died from gas inhalation in the basement of a clinic in the Chilean capital of Santiago. An earlier report said that victims died in a blast sparked by a gas leak. However, Mayor Claudio Dorrego dismissed claims. According to first responses, 2 of the victims were cleaning at a septic tank at the clinic with hydrochloric acid. Another was killed while trying to rescue them. The 4th victim has not yet been confirmed. And Mexican lawmakers continue to debate a controversial proposed measure presented by President Enrique Peña Nieto. The measure seeks to allow primarily North American agents to carry and use their weapons in Mexico. Our correspondent Clayton Kahn has more.
On February 24th, Mexico's President Enrique Peña Nieto sent a bill to the Mexican Senate to reform the country's firearms and explosives law, permitting foreign agents to carry and use their weapons in Mexican territory. Opposition leaders call it a threat to national sovereignty.
North American agencies performing duties that correspond to the Mexican state and also armed, it is completely absurd. And the president has lost his conscience. This step is a sign of an increasingly real occupation.
Security experts believe it goes beyond the president's stated intention to allow greater fluidity and security at Mexico's northern border. They say it is simply an imposition of U.S. foreign security policy.
Unfortunately, we are an undeveloped country, a country dependent of its neighbor superpower, with which shares some 3,700 meters of border and that allows them to dictate the rules.
The measure will grant authority for U.S. Border Patrol agents to execute operations in Mexican territory, presumably to control the flow of illicit drugs, arms, and people. However, many citizens echo the fear that Mexico is losing its self-determination.
This idea that American agencies carry their weapons was developed a while back, but it is a lie that is part of the U.S. invasion of Mexico.
While Mexico's president affirms that the plan is an adoption of a tried and tested agreement between Canada and the United States, rights groups point to many examples of abuse of force by U.S. authorities on Mexican citizens as reason for concern. According to statistics by Mexico's Office of Foreign Affairs, abuse by U.S. police or border agents have left at least 74 Mexicans dead since 2006. Clayton Kahn, Telesur, Mexico City.
Around the world, Indonesia rejected an Australian proposal for a prisoner swap made it save the life of 2 Australian drug smugglers expanded to feed a firing squad. The planned execution has ramped up diplomatic tension between Australia and Indonesia after repeated pleas for leniency from Australian officials. Indonesia's Vice President Yusuf Kalla said the execution of another convicted drug smuggler of Brazilian nationality could be postponed if he is found to be mentally ill. Italian authorities reported that 10 North African migrants died after the rubber boat capsized roughly 50 miles from the Libyan shoreline. Meanwhile, merchant ships rescued over 900 other migrants, many of whom were from Syria, Palestine, Libya, and Tunisia. According to official figures, over 300 refugees drowned in February attempting to reach Italian shores. And China opened its annual parliamentary meeting with the country's premier telling that the world's first largest economy is still strong despite the global slump. Speaking to 3,000 delegates gathered at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing, Premier Li Keqiang committed to improve governance while continuing the anti-corruption drive in the country and vowed to fight pollution. The leader said the projected growth was reassessed at 7% instead of 7.5%. Despite the decline, China will remain on course to record the highest GDP growth in the world this year.
Over the past year, my country's development has faced a serious and complicated international and internal environment. With great difficulty, the global economy has seen recovery, and the main economic groups have taken divergent paths. Domestically, downward economic pressure continues to increase, and we face many interconnected difficulties and challenges.
Ukrainian authorities said an explosion at a building owned by the fascist movement in the city of Odessa could have been an attack. No casualties have been reported so far in the blast that ripped through a ground floor of the 3-story apartment building early Thursday. The group provides troops for Kyiv in their fight against the Eastern rebels and has been called a neo-Nazi outfit by many observers. Let's continue. U.S. Ambassador to South Korea has underwent surgery receiving 80 stitches in his face after being slashed by a Korean nationalist Wednesday. Mark Lippert was attacked during a breakfast meeting at a cultural center in Seoul. Doctors said Lippert was left with a 4-inch gash in the right side of his face by an assailant using a knife. The attacker was identified as Kim Ki-young, who was jailed in 2010 for trying to attack the Japanese ambassador with a piece of concrete. And one of the late night's most recognizable faces took advantage of the zoo in Cuba-U.S. relations, bringing his cameras to the island. On Wednesday, late-night talk show host Conan O'Brien aired an episode of his program recently filmed in Cuba. O'Brien largely avoided political topics, but did acknowledge that the announcement to restore ties between Washington and Havana marked a historic time. North America's largest soccer league avoided a player strike 2 days before the start of the season. Major League Soccer chief Don Garber said the league and its players struck in a deal in principle on a new collective bargaining agreement on Wednesday after a day-long round of negotiations. A new 5-year deal comes just as the MLS's 20th season scheduled to open on Friday. Players had threatened to strike if their demands for free agency were not met. More on this and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. Have a nice day.